Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Marco Dre Show, everyone. It's Thursday, December 11th, 2025. Thank you again for tuning in today's show to hear all of the relevant groundbreaking news here in America and around the world, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Don't forget to follow the show where you might get your podcast. It's now available on all streaming apps for your listening pleasures. And be sure to share with as many people as possible so we can make logic common again right here in America. Hope everyone's ready for the best hour radio has to offer, uncensored and ready to go. Let's get down to brass tacks right away. Let's begin with my first segment here with an article from Paul Craig Roberts. You're never going to believe this is actually happening. And it's in nowhere in the mainstream media right now. Not one place, and I know because I've looked at it. But this is extremely troubling and extremely shocking. I'm sure you will find it the exact same. It says here that Israel's Knesset, that's their Congress-like office, their legislature, approves legislation that legalizes the execution of Palestinian abductees. I'm not making this stuff up. But again, it's nowhere. Not the AP, not CBS, New York Times, Fox News, nowhere. Nowhere to be seen. It says here, the first reading of the legislation passed the Israeli legislature by a vote of 39 votes in favor and 16 against. 2 more readings of the bill are required before the measure becomes law. The bill was sponsored by the Israeli minister Ben-Gvir. Oh, the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Who now leads the Jewish Power Party, which by all appearances is to the right of the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s. The Israeli ministry and the members wear a pin on their lapel in the form of a noose to indicate their attitude toward Palestinians. The bill sponsored by the Israeli minister is for the purpose of legitimatizing the execution of Palestinian prisoners who have long been subject to torture and death in Israeli prisons. Again, many of them being held without any type of charge. You know, we were talking about the hostages that Hamas took on October 7th. What about the 12,000 plus that are in Israeli prisons right now? Not a word about it. Now, I know some 1,700 were released as a result of this so-called ceasefire, which is no ceasefire at all, of course, with still killings every single day of Palestinians behind this fictitious line, of which no one knows where the hell it is. But the bill legitimizes Israel's past crimes as well as future ones. Israel's doctors are prohibited by their union's ethical ban from assisting in the execution of prisoners. However, Ben-Gvir has gone on to say that despite the ban, he has received hundreds of phone calls from Israeli doctors volunteering to execute Palestinian prisoners. This creep was seen walking around prisons suggesting something of the sort earlier. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. It's inhumane. It's a war crime. It's sickening to hear stuff like this. Where is the outrage? Where is the UN? Where is everybody? How is it possible that a government in the world to accept ambassadors from a state that is so brutally evil? I have no idea. Where the hell is Mike Huckabee on this, by the way? Does he have anything to say about this? Does he agree with it? Does he disagree with it? Does anybody know? I mean, God, he's over there, 3-4 months a year living there? Is he going to let us know that this is happening? What does Donald Trump think about this? Does he know about this? Again, why will we have governments of the world tolerating this? This inhumanity? Now, of course, I know I'm supposed to, read to you the wonderful line. These are just barbarians. They're animals. They deserve this. They, attacked Israel on October 7th. Therefore, self-defense. But look at this. I mean, we're going to just now start executing people without any type of charge? No due process? Again, I told you, people have been held without any type of crime attributed to them. And now they're just going to kill these people? Just quietly? No one's going to know about this? I mean, where is the complaint about? Where is the uproar? Where is the outrage that innocent people are going to be slaughtered simply for being Palestinian? Now, again, if the roles were reversed in this case, you would imagine that the media would be up in arms on this, and rightfully so. But we're not hearing anything about this. So what? Does it goes quietly into the night? Nobody knows about it, so we'll just brush it under the rug? I mean, this is sick. And by the way, again, they're said to be our number one greatest ally. I've yet to see any proof of that, by the way. Again, an ally is a mutual partner in something. There's somebody where you get a benefit from, obviously, working with them. They get a benefit from working with you to the equal effects. Do we see that from any nation around the world? We call the UK an ally. What do they do for us? Can anyone point to anything? How about Germany? How about France? Any of these countries? No, we have acquaintances. And of course, we're the benefactor for so many different things. Of course, which fraud, malfeasance, and God knows what else is always attributed. This is sick, though. This needs to be spoken about. This should be alarming to everyone listening to this, and it should be opposed. And again, you're not hearing this anywhere. I've seen this nowhere. So when I searched for this morning, I said, why is this not in every single newspaper? Why is it being spoken about on the legacy media? Where is the outrage? Yeah, nobody's talking about it. Nobody but me. People like me, of course. I shouldn't say I'm the only one. Paul Kirk Roberts certainly is talking about it, and so will his listeners hear this. But look at that, 39-16 vote to allow the murder, the killing, the execution of Palestinians that have been abducted from their territory. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up, folks. So I wanted you to know this first, you that listen to my show. So you heard it here first, and I'm sure later on you'll hear about it some other time in the distant future, hopefully. All right, moving on. We got to talk about the other elephant in the room besides this grave human rights violation that's happening right now in Israel. This is the Gateway Pundit, and I'm sure probably most of you have heard about this as of yesterday. It says the Trump administration releases video of U.S. seizing Venezuelan oil tanker. So just to, provoke Venezuela even more now we're stopping their advancement of them selling oil. Now, it was reported in Bloomberg earlier on Wednesday evening that the U.S. Coast Guard, with the help from the United States Navy, seized the oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. President Trump then later confirmed the report and boasted about the seizure, stating that we've just seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. Large tanker, it's very Trump-esque, this quote. Large, very large, largest one we've ever seized in action. And other things are happening. You'll be seeing that later. So let's talk about this. He said it was seized for a very good reason. What could possibly be that very good reason? Other than we'd like to provoke a war with them. Now, the Trump administration also released unclassified footage of the operation. So there's a couple things about this I want to go over. Is there legality behind this? Are we able to go and stop a Venezuelan oil tanker from reaching China, from reaching Iran? Do we have the legal capacity to do this? And the short answer, of course, is no. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay? So the United States stopping this oil tanker, just like these airstrikes, by the way, that resulted in the deaths of 87 people to date, again, alleged drug traffickers, not convicted, is also an illegal act. This is an illegal act here. Let's get into the why, though. So we got this article from the Gateway Pundit stating that the United States seized this oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, as mentioned. Trump now goes in and says it was seized for a good reason, but they never tell us what that good reason is. Pam Bondi reported today the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Homeland Security Investigations, and the United States Coast Guard, with support from the Department of War, which is really the Department of Defense, executed a seizure from seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. So now you're probably saying to yourself, okay, well, we put sanctions on them. Therefore, this must be legal on our behalf, right? Now, here's the problem with all this. We don't have any real sanctions on them. We have U.S. sanctions on them, which are different than UN sanctions, which is the crux here. So if the the United Nations Security Council goes through, for example, if we put in a resolution, we say we want to put sanctions on all Venezuelan oil. So the UN Security Council then passes a vote, right? They sit down, there's 15 members, they need 9 votes to pass it. After they listen to this request, and if the resolution gets that 9 votes without any veto from any of the other members, it becomes a mandatory UN member sanction. We adopt the sanctions, and then again, all the UN members then have to follow through on their own laws and regulations and adhere to them. So again, it's part of Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which again is a legal binding document. So once it is passed, all nations have to adhere to it. But that hasn't happened yet. The U.S. hasn't even gone to the UN to pass this resolution. So it's simply a U.S. unilateral basis sanction. So we have no jurisdiction to stop their ships. And again, this violates international laws. We cannot seize or steal anyone else's property. But again, this violates their own sovereignty. And again, it's an unlawful expropriation, in this case, of crude oil. Now, again, we haven't seized the ship itself, but we've stopped it from advancing. Again, same goes with preventing one's ability to move the said product, though. So as of right now, we've just stopped the movements, not taken the oil. But here, this is interesting to me. While the U.S. sanctions are, again, under domestic law right now, we've put these sanctions in our own laws. Again, they're not legally binding to any other country. Venezuela can ship whatever the hell it wants. Doesn't matter. Can ship bananas for all the hell we care. Doesn't matter. It's not under international law. So we have no right to stop them. They're free to travel in international waters just as we are. So if, for example, the U.S. wanted to freeze Citgo's assets, which, again, is owned, it's Venezuelan owned, by Petróleos de Venezuela, S.A., that's the company. It's state-owned, Venezuela. We can actually block those assets under U.S. law. That's perfectly legal. And right now, we're actually doing that right now. And again, court-ordered sale is in effect now of this PDA Holdings company. That, again, is the front for this group. And they want to get shares of $5.9 billion. So that's what the company is estimated to be worth. So they want to freeze those assets. They want to control it. They want to sell it off to another energy company. Again, this is Citgo, by the way. Again, Citgo can still operate in the United States, but they're freezing all these assets to no appeal to the Venezuelans. So we got to understand something. There's a difference between U.S. sanctions, again, what happens within the United States, and UN Security Council sanctions, which all UN member states have to adhere to. So we've got to understand there's a complete difference in this. We have no right to tell them not to do anything of what they're doing right now. They can ship to Iran, they can ship to North Korea, they can ship it in circles around the Caribbean. It doesn't matter. We have no right to stop this boat. But yet nobody is talking about this. Everyone's saying, well, we got sanctions. Well, yeah, we have sanctions. Yeah, we can freeze their assets in the United States of any companies that are Venezuelan owned. We can do that. That's legal. But we have no right to stop them from transporting or importing any goods to their country. That's the big problem with all this. That's the problem I have with this. But now we just continue going on saying, well, this is fine. Kash Patel's chiming in saying, today the FBI and our partners executed a seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, used to transport sanctioned oil, that, again, we haven't sanctioned anything, from Venezuela to Iran. Again, we have no right to stop this. They have their own sovereignty. They're a sovereign nation. They can do whatever they want with their oil. It's their oil. They didn't steal it from anybody. So the tanker has been used in recent years in an illicit shipping network supporting foreign terrorism and terrorist organizations. Okay. All right, well, again, take it to the UN. Take it to the UN, see if it passes. Why haven't we done that? Trump's been in charge in office for almost a year now. Go to the UN and see if it'll actually work. Are we really going to shut down a major OPEC nation from selling its oil? Something tells me no on this case. But again, it's to prevent Venezuela from operating in their own commerce. Can we do this? Again, it's going to create just more turmoil in the region, of course. And it's going to piss off a whole lot of other countries dependent on that oil. So we can sit here and say, this is great. The hell with Venezuela. The hell with Maduro. But in the end, who's this going to affect? Well, it's going to affect the people buying this oil. China, Iran, you name it. Again, folks, none of this is necessary, by the way. None of this is necessary. There's no reason for us to do this, except the fact that we want to start a war with Venezuela. And it seems like as time goes on, we're just tiptoeing ever so much closer to having that hot war with them. Nothing today has been stated any different about this seizure or prevention of the shipment of this oil. I don't know exactly what's going to come as a result of this, what Venezuela will do as a result of this. I don't know. But this is obviously nothing, any type of positive for us. Just wanted to share all this with you, of course. All right, moving on. The Wall Street Journal. Fed cuts yet again. Signals may be done for just right now, as Jerome Powell signals this quarter-point cut for between 3.5 and 3.75%, a new three-year low, of course aimed at protecting against sharper than anticipated slowdown in hirings. So, the Fed just had a vote, 9-3, first time in 6 years that three officials cast dissents, which is a little bit strange. Two officials thought that the reduction wasn't warranted, and then while another one favored an even larger half-point cut. Now, with progress on inflation being stalled, officials then indicated in a run-up to this week's decision that further reductions could require evidence of labor-based market deterioration. Jerome Powell then said in a news press conference yesterday, "We're well positioned to wait and see how the economy evolves from here." So I guess Trump got his interest rate cut. He'll be very happy about that. I'm sure he's wanted them cut for some time. But still, Powell then defended the decision to cut now rather than waiting until the Fed's next meeting in late January. He said when we'll have significantly more data that has been delayed because of the fall's government shutdown. So what's going to happen as a result of this? Well, it'll be cheaper to borrow money. So again, they're hoping that the economy expands as a result of this. They feel that inflation has cooled, or at least cooled to a point at which they can control it. And again, while prices are still greatly inflated from the Biden regime era, they're hoping that now the markets will open up, the labor markets will continue to cool gradually. That's what they're expecting. That's what Powell has stated. And Wall Street's happy about this. We're seeing the Dow Jones up, slightly, up 1%. We're seeing the S&P 500 rose a little bit yesterday. As a result, the NASDAQ gaining again, 0.3%. So people are now looking at this saying, okay, the economy's going to open up again. People are going to be able to borrow more money at a cheaper rate. So more people are going to be doing this. And the stock market's going to continue to grow. That's the whole point of all this. So they're happy about this. Now, the only problem I have with this, in the article it says here that the Fed no longer described the unemployment rate, which ticked up to 4.4% in September it was 4% early this year when Trump took office, as having remained low in its statement. Again, if it's going to continue to go up, though, that's not necessarily a good thing. And again, we're seeing lots of layoffs too, folks. So that doesn't sit well with me. Again, I understand why they want to do this. But understand something. Once the Fed start lending out more money, which is going to be the end result of this, you're going to see a lot more money chasing the same or fewer goods. What does that always lead to? Probably more inflation. Now, will that happen indefinitely? I'm not really sure. But I know that's always the end result when we start printing out more money. Inflation will start to trickle up. Now, does it mean it's going to trickle up like we saw during the Biden administration? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. We saw 25 to 30% inflation over a 4-year period of time. That's really unprecedented. That's not something common. We hadn't seen inflation that awful since the Carter administration. But over time, again, I told you this before, Trump inherited a mess with the economy. That's a true statement. That's a truism. Trump had nothing to do with the economy that he got. What he handed to Joe Biden was amazing compared to what he got from Joe Biden. And again, it takes time. When Reagan took office in 81, it took several months. It took over a year to start seeing that inflation really start to come down. And what was the end result of that was what we saw was a great economy. Major growth. Major take-home pay. Much lower interest rates. A great expansion in GDP. GNP as well. I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, you could look at the economy throughout the 80s, and again, we saw a little recession back in 87. The economy goes up, the economy goes down. But we saw the effects of what Reagan did in the 1980s well into the 1990s. That's how great the economy was. So those policies that Reagan implemented early on grew a fantastic economy. So can Trump come in and turn this around? Yes, he really can. Again, we didn't expect this to happen overnight, but we also didn't expect things to continue so slightly to get worse. That's the problem. We have seen inflation this year. Now, it's not to the extent Joe Biden gave us inflation, but from last year to this year, roughly we're up 3%. They like a 2% margin year over year. They can control that, the Fed. That's why they were hesitant to lower interest rates from the start. The problem is, again, we're seeing these things. We're not getting the manufacturing back just yet. We're getting record number of investments. Now, I told you before, just because we're getting 21 trillion doesn't mean we're getting just 21 trillion this year. That could be over a whole slew of 10-year span. So we have to understand. We have to put things in context. Yes, we're getting more people involved. Yes, we're getting more people investing in the United States. Great. I'm happy about that. We want these jobs to come back, though. We've got to get the manufacturing back. And if Trump can do that, if he can bring the manufacturing back where we're making all these products again in the United States like we once did, that economy will boom. It'll explode. It'll be massive. But we also have to understand we've got to take care of people at home, too. We've got to get rid of these H-1B visas. We've got to stop this. We've got to stop bringing in 1 million people every single year, as we have for so long. We've got to stop doing this. We have to absorb the people that are on the unemployment lines. But we've got to invest in America first. That's got to be Trump's number one thing. If not, the midterms are going to be a disaster for us. Come 2026, and we have only the Republicans to blame for this. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, if you're going to bring in 130,000 people to take American jobs when you're growing the economy, you're going to lose. That's just going to be the end result of it. You are going to lose. And rightfully so. So only time will tell exactly what will happen as a result of this. I think the economy is going to start to open up a little bit right now. I do hope inflation will start to drop. I know energy prices are greatly down, which is fantastic. Trump said the other day, though, he gives the economy an A++++++, or whatever the hell he said. I don't see it that way. I don't think the economy is that great. Certainly not. I mean, most Americans are not feeling that. In fact, most Americans would disagree with that, by and large. I think 3/4 think the economy is not where it needs to be right now, roughly. He's got a lot of work to do. But I do think if he gets the right policies implemented, if he gets the right investments, if he starts to bring back the manufacturing, and if we start hiring Americans and not people from India and China and bringing them in the country to take these jobs for a lower wage, I think you'll see the economy grow like we've never seen. Probably since the Reagan Revolution. And I think we're in dire need of that. I think you'd all agree with me on that, too. One of the best things about the Trump administration right now, though, is that he put in RFK Jr. as the head of HHS. I got to tell you this. One of the best things he's done was RFK Jr. Bringing him in to stir the pot with what's going on with the health of Americans. Now, most of us are happy about this. We're happy to see this. We like seeing this. We like seeing this challenge to the status quo, if you will. But not everyone on Capitol Hill is happy about this. Look at this article I have for you in Breitbart. It says, House Democrat files impeachment articles against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for, quote-unquote, turning his back on science. Now, this woman who is filing these impeachments, and by the way, they're trying to do this too with Pete Hegseth right now. I think there's probably a much better case for that than, obviously, this. But Representative Haley Stevens, a Democrat of Michigan, who's now apparently running for the U.S. Senate for God knows what reason, has now recently filed articles of impeachment on Wednesday against Robert F. Kennedy Jr., saying that he's turned his back on science. Now, this is ridiculous. So he's turned his back on science and the safety of the American people. Michiganders cannot take another day of his chaos, is what she wrote in her statement. Now, again, what is she going to file articles of impeachment for? What law has he broken? And the answer, of course, is nothing. Now, a spokesperson for HHS dismantled the impeachment as a political ploy. Of course it is. They got to try and take down RFK Jr. God knows how much money she gets from Big Pharma. And by the way, this woman is not in a science field. So, again, she's, I guess, just pontificating her own beliefs here. I haven't seen anything here that would indicate he's done anything of any sort of wrongdoing. But he went on to say Secretary Kennedy remains focused on the work of improving Americans' health and lowering costs, not on partisan political stunts. Stevens is the second Democrat in recent days to move to impeach a Trump cabinet official, with Representative Thanedar, I believe is how you say his name, he's also from Michigan, just filing articles of impeachment against Pete Hegseth. Yeah. So let's look at this, though. Let's take a look at what RFK Jr. has actually done. Let's not waste any time here. What has he actually done? He's done a lot. And by the way, he's one of the few people that will take on the establishment, which is, again, has been just ingrained into the American psyche for so long that whatever a scientist says is just fine. Everything is wonderful. Hey, health is great in America. You can't make this stuff up. Look at some of the things he's done, though. I'll list some off for you. Well, he's changed vaccine oversight. He's dismissed the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Board. He's asking for new studies on vaccines and, of course, testing their links to autism. I like this. I said this is fantastic that he's doing this. We should know that vaccines are safe. A couple of weeks ago on one of my shows, I talked to you that there's been zero follow-up on these vaccines and, of course, the safety and efficacy of them. Again, I'll implore anyone to go look it up. You go show me the last double-blind placebo study that's been done on some of these vaccines. You're not going to find them. And what the CDC will report when you're searching this up, again, use AI, look for articles. Anything you look up is going to tell you, well, the formula was changed. We rely on VAERS. So you've done no safety testing. You're simply going to rely on VAERS to put this out? A show that's been out for 40 years, 50 years? Are going to do any new research studies on these testing? If they're safe or not? With the new formulas you're implementing? It's mind-boggling, folks. Very, very mind-boggling. Again, we saw how the COVID vaccine was pushed down upon us. Zero safety testing done. It was done under emergency use authorization. Yet the FDA still pushed this out. And the way they do it is the same way they've done it always. They simply go and say, yep, we approve this. That's it. Really? You have no safety testing? All the animals died in the safety testing? You had 2 months of data? Anyone that got sick, you kicked out of the study? Really? And you're going to pass this? Again, the VAERS has over 2.6 million people on it, folks. Those are vaccine adverse effects in the survey. And by the way, they're all legally binding as well. It's not just some random person coming out and saying, yep, this affected me. So, again, it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And again, the big pharma companies, these big pharmaceutical companies, these big vaccine manufacturers have no way to allow them to be held accountable because of the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Immunity Act that Reagan cited. I think it's one of the worst bills he ever signed into law. Absolutely one of the most worst bills he possibly ever could have signed into law. because it makes them unaccountable. You cannot sue them if their product injures you. So after that, they said, well, our hands aren't tied to any type of liability. We can do whatever the hell we want. We don't have to do any safety testing. You can't sue us. We're immune. We've been given carte blanche to give you whatever the hell we want to give you. Put whatever we want in it. And again, I'll let you look up the number of vaccines that have greatly increased since the late 1980s. When children are getting on these shot schedules, it went from, I think, really went from 3 to 8 throughout a child's entire life. And started getting more and more and more. Now it's up to 78. Kids get 78 different shots from birth all the way up until the age of 18. And we're seeing detrimental effects of that. Kids that are fully vaccinated. And it's not just autism, it's learning disabilities, allergies, chronic illnesses. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is coming in saying, hey, look, something's wrong here. We're sicker than ever. And again, we need to ask questions about this. Let me play you just a little clip when he was on Bill Maher's show when he was actually running for president before he was put on as HHS secretary. But he was asked about this, and Bill Maher kind of questioned his stance on his vice president saying she would remove the Moderna shot because of the lack of efficacy and the adverse effects that it could provide people. And this is how he responded to this.
We need to have, again, true double-blind, placebo-controlled trials on that. There's 25% of Americans who believe that they know somebody who was killed by a COVID vaccine.
Killed?
Killed. 25% of Americans, 52% of Americans believe that the vaccines are causing injuries, including death. 52%. If you look at the clinical trial studies, the actual studies that were done that were released of the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna has not released it. If you look at the Pfizer vaccine, there were 22,000 people in the placebo group, 22,000 people who got the actual vaccine. And the people who got the vaccine had a 23% higher death rate from all causes at the end of that study.
But that could not.
Okay. Now, does this sound like a guy who's turning his back on science? He's carefully looking at the data, and he's making an interpretation based on it. We need more studies. We need a double-blind, placebo-based study. And what a double-blind, placebo-based study really is, just so we're all on the same page, for those of you that might not know, that means you have two different groups. One group gets the vaccine. The other group does not get the vaccine. And they see, are there rates in which, for example, the unvaccinated group is at much greater risk of developing this illness? Are there any side effects to those in that group? Are kids in the vaccinated group coming down with an illness not even related to the vaccine itself, or even the disease you're trying to prevent? Are there any adverse effects? What do we notice in kids long term? See, we haven't even done that with the COVID shot yet. There is no long-term study. It was produced quick. It was pushed out quick. People got it. And you have 2.6 million people on this VAERS report. That is very, very alarming. And the fact that these shots haven't been pulled yet is also very alarming to me. So he's well within his means to suggest that we do these studies. And we should be championing that. We should be championing this transparency. We all should be doing that. Anyway, let's look at more things he's done. Got rid of the hepatitis B shots for newborns. That's good. It's not necessary, of course, unless the mom has hepatitis B. It's a sexually transmitted disease. How the hell is an infant going to get hepatitis B? He shifted national vaccine policy priorities by reducing universal vaccine schedules. Again, he's challenging the way in which kids are given these shots and when they're administered. He's introduced MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Again, he's targeting Big Pharma's influence on the medical industry as well. Regulatory changes to the FDA oversight. That would be the food safety rules, the vaccine review protocols, safety testing on the vaccines, things of that nature. He's advocated for natural therapies or homeopathic approach to health. Again, taking supplements, vitamins, all the things I tell you to do. Created 120 initiatives to combat childhood chronic illnesses. Who could argue that? Taking thimerosal out of all flu shots, thank God. We know that's linked to things like dementia. So there's a whole list of things that he's done that are extremely positive and powerful that is focused on getting Americans more healthier. Now again, if you want to get a flu shot, I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, if you want to get a flu shot, get a flu shot. Get 10 flu shots. No one's stopping you. His position is not to enforce anyone from doing anything. You can make up your own mind. You can still vaccinate your kid with an hepatitis B shot when they're born. It's completely ill-advised. It's ridiculous. It's not based on any science. But you could do that. You can give them a vitamin K shot, too. It's up to you. But like anything I've told you, the one thing you should always do is do your research. What's in these shots? What things are in these shots that do not belong in a newborn that's moments old? And by the way, if you're planning on having children, you should damn well know everything that happens in that hospital room. Because a lot of times they will take the baby and they will vaccinate without you even noticing. That's how they do these things. So you need to keep your eye on these, people in the health industry and healthcare and what have you. And you need to know these things. You need to do your own research because a lot of times they're not going to tell you. They'll say, oh, are you ready for your shot? Well, you're up to date. You got to be up to date. You want to go to school, don't you? Okay. And you just cave because you got to send your kids to school. What's in these shots? By the way, they're seeing a case, too, in the state of New York for the Amish being exempt for religious reasons for taking vaccines as well. That's happening right now, too. So there's a lot of things happening. Especially with these vaccines. People need to be aware, of course, of what is going on with all of them. And again, we all should be very much aware of this. Don't you want to know what you're putting in your children, for God's sakes? What your kids are eating in their food? We all should know about all of this. It's very, very important. All right, moving on. PJ Media, the DOJ ends disparate impact liability, a huge win for equality under the law. This is a fantastic article. I'm very happy to see this, by the way. And we should all be championing this right now. This is something very positive. It says here that the Department of Justice struck a mighty blow for the primal constitutional principle of equality under the law when it implemented an executive order by President Donald Trump, signed last April, that ordered the Attorney General to rescind regulations that encouraged racial preferences. Finally, fantastic. This is completely illegal under the Civil Rights Act. So even the Washington Post agreed with it. This is how apparent this is to how wrong this was. And they agreed with the action by Attorney General Pam Bondi to end the routine practice of using disparate impact metrics to prove discrimination, quote unquote. The disparate impact process grew from a 1971 Supreme Court case, Griggs versus Duke Power Company. At the time, there had to be evidence of intentional discrimination. But this wasn't good enough for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right, that kind of oversees the Civil Rights Act. And they decided to test the limits of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act by arguing to the Supreme Court that the purpose of Title VI was to accomplish economic results, not merely to influence the motives or feelings of employers. See how they spun that? So in other words, all the plaintiff had to do was prove that, well, hey, that blacks or other minorities were underrepresented in a certain company's workforce to win a discrimination case. See how they did this? That's why you have race-based admissions in colleges and what have you. So thus was born disparate impact, right? And like any good bureaucratic rule, over the next 50 years it grew into a complete monster. The rule then tilted the playing field further against companies whose intentions, to be fair, were tossed right out the window in favor of counting the color of noses to determine whether the company was discriminating or not. You see how this works. So in other words, it was DEI in motion. You just didn't know about it. But the Washington Post agrees. They said the Civil Rights Act of 1964 aimed at intentional discrimination, so therefore they couldn't base their hiring simply on race or creed or what have you. It should have been merit-based, as should everything in this country. Now, the concept of disparate impact stretches the idea to the point that of incoherence, really. It says that different average outcomes among groups, even if there was no intent to discriminate, can still be a civil rights violation. Again, this goes back again to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. All this nonsense was put to do this. So, institutions that receive Justice Department grants have been regulated according to this standard, prohibited from doing anything that has the effect of creating disparities among these so-called minority groups. Now, Pam Bondi has said not anymore, as she explained the old standard subjected grant recipients to penalties under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act for unintentional disparate outcomes, which the recipient may not even know without an investigation. So the regulations created an incentive for institutions, right? Think of our wonderful college campuses today, to tally and classify their students or employees, black, white, Mexican, Chinese, Jewish, and so on, to avoid numerical imbalances that could trigger liability. So now you have a quota system. You have to hire a certain number of blacks. You have to hire a certain number of Mexicans, which again, anyone could be Mexican of any race. Most of them are white, by the way. But they made that into a little group too, Chinese, Jewish, so on. You know, you understand. So now they're looking at these things. They're saying, oh, we got to hire this, we got to hire that, versus saying, who's the best candidate? Who is the best person that's going to execute the job? Now, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, was not happy about this because they're a communist organization, number one, left-wing lunatics, and they're hell-bent on destroying the fabric of society, so long as it's the white people. But the ACLU has long relied on disparate impact liability as a tool to remove systemic barriers to opportunities in housing, employment, education, and beyond for historically marginalized people, the group said in a statement. For example, the ACLU has fought to remove unjust barriers to housing opportunities for black women and other renters of color by challenging landlords' use of blanket bans on prior eviction records. So that means if you weren't paying your rent, of course, they can't use that against you, should you want new tenants. Look at this, regardless of whether the eviction cases were dismissed. So there you go. I mean, in a nutshell, this goes to show you how these groups took the Civil Rights Act and perverted it, of course, to push it towards favoring minorities over, again, merit-based outcomes. But how much damage was done by this EEOC? How many whites for the past 60 years, when applying for jobs, were told, thanks but no thanks, maybe next time, if you're a good little effeminate commie that will help ruin the system? How many jobs did minorities get that they didn't even deserve to have, to fill this fictitious quota system that they put in place here? Now, of course, this will kill DEI, which it should. It should be where it belongs, in the dustbin of history. So finally, good on Pam Bondi for this. Finally, hey, good job, Pam. I finally agree with you on one thing. Fantastic. Right where this belongs. Now make sure these colleges rule on, merit-based admissions and not DEI as well, or filling some stupid quotas. My goodness. And yeah, we see this with employers nowadays. We will hire a certain number of, black women to be pilots, right? Didn't Delta do that not too long ago? They wanted 50% of their pilots to be women of color. Why not just hire people that can fly the damn planes? Why does everything have to be race-based to these people? It completely violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Bondi went on to say, though, in a statement, claims that these revisions somehow authorize discrimination are bogus. They do the exact opposite. Purely treating one group differently than another remains illegal, as it should. And Bondi's memo notes that eliminating disparate impact liability does not preclude the use of data on disparate outcomes to help prove intentional discrimination. Yep. Finally, Finally, we've got this right. Finally, the leftists now will be obviously running to the courts to reimpose this, I'm sure. But I'm sure this would go up to the Supreme Court should this be challenged. But she's ruling based on the law. You can't have race-based outcomes for one group of people and not for others. That's the whole point of the Civil Rights Act, folks. So I'm glad Donald Trump signed this. I'm glad Pam Bondi followed through with this. And I'm glad we're seeing this DEI crap end, as it should. Absolutely. Oh, by the way, speaking of idiots, Governor Walz, this is in Front Page Magazine, vows to fight Somali fraud with more Somalis. And why not? He gets voted in by these schmucks. Some say the best way to fight fire is with fire. Well, Governor Tim Walz seems to believe that after, $1.5 billion in Somali fraud, he's going to fight Somali fraud with bringing in more Somalis. He wanted to say in his statement, he said, these folks better not ever mistake our kindness for our weakness because we are going to defend our neighbors. These guys bring out the worst of me. He's talking about, of course, the Trump administration here. I hate it when I get to a point where it's petty, and I hate it when the sense of anger comes up on you, is what Walt said. But the antidote to that is positive actions to improve lives that go against what they are trying to do. So instead of demonizing our Somali community, we're going to do more to welcome more in. There you go. There you go, Tim. Fantastic. There you go. I mean, he has absolutely nothing to do with immigration into the country. I wonder if he understands that. But I'm sure he would do anything he can to usher more that are already in the United States coming into these little enclaves in the state of Minnesota. But of course, we better not mistake Waltz's kindness towards Somali was with weakness towards America. Just because Waltz won't stop Somalis from, ripping off $1.5 billion, sending it back to war-torn Somalia, doesn't mean he's weak enough to let them get deported, right? I mean, he's going to stand in the way of ICE. He says, we have in Minnesota per capita-wise more refugees than any other state. He said to a cheering crowd. And of course, he has more fraud per capita than any other state as well. I mean, there could possibly be a connection, right, folks? Of course, right? And of course, that's not going to stop him. He's not going to go after anybody. No, why would he? Why would he? By the way, this is the same dunce who said this on Meet the Press a few days ago. Take a listen to this.
We got a guy on Thanksgiving where we spent time with our families. We ate, we played Yahtzee, we cheered for football or whatever. This guy is apparently in a room ranting about everything else. This is not normal behavior. It is not healthy. And presidents throughout time have released a couple things. They've released their tax returns, not Donald Trump, and they've released their medical records, not Donald Trump. And look, the MRI is one thing, but I think what's most concerning about this is, as your viewers out there are listening, has anyone in the history of the world ever have an MRI assigned to them and have no idea what it was for, as he says? So look, it's clear the president's fading physically. I think the mental capacity, again, ranting, crazily at midnight on Thanksgiving about everything else, there's reasons for us to be concerned. This is a guy that randomly says the airspace over Venezuela is closed. He's ruminating on if you could win a nuclear war. Look, this is a serious position. It's the most powerful position in the world. And we have someone at midnight throwing around slurs that demonize our children. And at the same time, he's not solving any of the problems. So I'm deeply concerned that he is incapable of doing the job.
Okay. So we didn't answer the question, of course, about Somali fraud, but we went on a little tirade about President Trump. And by the way, moron, he did release his tax returns. Remember they had it on a Rachel Maddow show? They found out he made something like $137 million, and it was either 2005 or 2006. And then he paid $38 million in taxes. Do you think that if Donald Trump wasn't paying his taxes, the Democrats would have already figured this out by now? Do you really believe that? That Joe Biden, who, of course, weaponized the IRS, wouldn't have weaponized against President Trump? Look, they try to get him on phony bank loans. Remember that? Letitia James, Jack Smith, remember all that? What'd they get? Nothing. Absolutely nothing on him. Again, there's many things you could say about President Trump. That certainly is not one of them, I would have to say. But, Tim Walz, an MRI, really? The guy's 79 years old. Imagine if he got an MRI. Would there be any brain matter to be even seen? Any neurons even firing off in that dunce's head? Can you imagine if he was vice president too, by the way? What trouble we'd be in right now? My God. By the way, CBS News had this article this morning. It says federal judge in Maryland orders Abrego Garcia's immediate release from ICE custody. Why we're still dealing with this guy, I have no idea. He's here illegally from El Salvador. Why are we dealing with this? Why has he not been deported? I don't understand this. Now we have a judge saying that there was no final order of removal from the government to deport Abrego Garcia from the United States, despite the Trump administration's repeated attempts to remove him. Because respondents have no statutory authority to remove Abrego Garcia to a third country, absent a removal order, his removal cannot be considered reasonably foreseeable, imminent, or consistent with due process. That's what a judge said on Thursday. So here we go now. We're dealing with this clown, allegedly to be a member of MS-13. They've denied that. The Democrats have denied that. Even though I believe he was arrested with them, right? He is also arrested for domestic abuse as well. Here's the thing. He is an illegal alien. So there is no other issuance needed. He is not supposed to be here. He's not supposed to be in this country. He is not a citizen. He is from El Salvador. That's his country of origin. Why are we messing around with sending him to... They want to send him to Uganda, Eswatini, Ghana. Send him to El Salvador. Now, of course, he's saying, well, he fears his life if he goes back to El Salvador. El Salvador is one of the safest countries in the world right now, under Bukele. What the hell does he have to be worried about? Remember Van Hollen went down there to see him? In jail. Oh, my God, I can't believe we sent an illegal alien back to his country of origin. We have a right to deport people that are not from this country. That's per federal law. He's had his due process. He's not here illegally. He should be sent back. Stop messing around with this. Send him back. I'm so sick of hearing about this case. And why are we trying to send people to different... I don't understand this. Send them back to the countries in which they came from, where they are from. It says here in November, the Trump administration argued that Abrego Garcia had received significant due process in the United States. In a court filing, the Justice Department said a U.S. government asylum officer interviewed Abrego Garcia, who remains in federal immigration detention, and determined he had failed to prove he would face persecution or torture in Liberia. Why are we sending him to Liberia? Why are we wasting our time with this? Send him back to El Salvador. That's where he's from. He speaks Spanish, I'm sure. Send him back to El Salvador. It's ridiculous. Look at this. Came to the United States in 2011 from El Salvador illegally. Arrested by immigration authorities in March. Deported to his home country, despite having been granted legal status in 2019. I'm sick of this crap. Why is he getting legal status in this country? So the Department of Homeland Security prohibited the move to send him to El Salvador because of possible persecution by local gangs. That's all been solved. That's all been solved in El Salvador. Send him back. It's like, I can stop hearing about this ridiculous case. If you're here illegally, you're here illegally. Look at this. It says, at the heart of the Abrego Garcia's challenge is a 2001 Supreme Court case in which the High Court said the government cannot indefinitely detain a person in the United States illegally if there is no significant likelihood of removal in the reasonable foreseeable future. So let's hurry this up, folks. Let's expedite this process. Let's get him out of here. Doesn't belong here. Doesn't belong in our jails. Get him out of here. I'm so sick of this. The government red tape and all this. Get rid of these people. They don't belong here. All right, folks. But you know what I do like? I like this part too. And again, I like that, we're focused on deportations, of course, even though they're very lagging behind on them. We've only deported about 300,000 illegal aliens. Although I'm happy that we're getting criminal aliens off the streets. We still have about 45 million illegals in this country, roughly. God knows how many visa holders that have expired are still living in this country. There's estimated to be 55 million of those. How are we going to do all this? We have judges like this that want to keep these people here that are supposed to be deported. And again, Trump is following immigration laws here, too. So he's not doing anything illegal. But here we have the Trump administration now announcing yesterday to add another militarized zone to the southern border, this time in California. This is in Newsmax, by the way. And they want to make it a part of the major shift that has thrust troops into border enforcement with Mexico like never before. They're getting the Department of Interior involved in this, and they said now it would transfer jurisdiction along most of California's southern border, which again borders Mexico, to the Navy, and again to reinforce the historic role public lands have played in safeguarding national sovereignty. The Interior Department described the newest national defense area in California as a high-traffic zone for unlawful crossings by so-called immigrants. Well, it's not by immigrants, by illegal aliens. Immigrants coming through ports of entry, and they do it legally, binding. So now what we're trying to do is create a zone, really a military strategy zone, which obviously pioneered back in April along a 170-mile stretch of the border in New Mexico, later expanded into portions of the border in Texas and Arizona alike. So now the newly designated militarized zone extends nearly from the Arizona state line to the Otay Mountains wilderness, traversing the Imperial Valley, which is, again, in southeastern California, and border communities, including the unincorporated community of Tecate, California, across the border from the Mexican city with the same name. So they have more than 7,000 troops being deployed to the border right now, along with an assortment of helicopters, drones, surveillance equipment. That's why Donald Trump shut down the border. That's why he's been successful doing this. Now, I still want to see a physical barrier there to make it more difficult for people to come in. And I mean, make it extremely difficult for people to come in. Now that they can break through the wall, now they can wire it open like we saw the Biden administration do. We need to stop this. And it seems like we're getting a good grip on this. So I'm happy to hear about this, that we're putting the right number of troops there, but we need a physical barrier there as well. We need a strong physical barrier. Not a barrier where people can break through the wall and squeeze through it. I want a barrier. Barbed wire. I don't even care if you make it electric. I don't give a damn. But I like the idea we're putting a lot more troops on the border as well. And again, we're working with our military and DHS to fund this. So I'm very happy to see all this. It says here that the new militarized zone was announced on the same day a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to end the deployment of California National Guard's troops in L.A. and return control of these troops to the state. Well, that's because Gavin Newsom doesn't want any law and order in his state, of course. That's exactly why. It's okay if you attack ICE agents. That's okay. Throw rocks at them, do whatever, attack them. That's totally fine under Gavin Newsom. Oh, by the way, too, California's in a deep mess with all this. This hasn't come through in an article, but it's being posted by California Representative Carl DeMaio, saying that the California Democrat politicians have now enacted a new rule that treats citizens worse than illegal aliens and gives discounts for tuition to illegal aliens over citizens here in the United States. Yep, that's coming from Gavin Newsom, of course, and of course his legislature. They just passed a new rule giving illegal aliens priority over American citizens for tuition. So you, the stupid American citizen, is going to be paying now for the illegal alien to have college tuition. Aren't you so generous? Right, it's part of this California Dream application. Ridiculous. Again, being pushed by the Democrat lunatics in Sacramento. Yep, reducing barriers for illegal aliens to get them made. Yep. Democrats in the late 2025 specifically granting priority tuition assistance to undocumented immigrants over citizens, a.k.a. illegal aliens. And we're shocked about this? Why would we be shocked about any of this? This is Gavin Newsom's MO. He will do anything for the illegal alien. He's always done this, folks. He's always done this, and he'll continue to do this his entire life, because that's who he is. He doesn't care about you. He's often said illegal aliens are his people. They're his people. And he's going to do everything he can to support them. Why wouldn't he? And it doesn't make any sense. except for the fact that he wants votes. He wants to look altruistic when he runs for president in 2028. We've seen this time and time again from him. But how do you figure that? California taxpayers now are funding tuition for illegal aliens that have no right to even be in the universities? The Trump administration needs to look at that as well. Anyone who's an illegal alien should not be taking the seat of an American student in a college classroom. End of story. I don't want to hear anything else about it. Folks, thanks again for being here. I appreciate you so much. All the articles will be posted on the podcast. And I'll see you here tomorrow on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good. Stay busy. God bless.